The Old West was never a place for the faint of heart. It was a sun-scorched graveyard where men woke up knowing the dawn might be their last and rode out anyway. Some didn't want gold, others didn't care for fame. A few weren't even trying to stay alive. Forget the legends, forget the myths. These are the raw, jagged portraits of three men who lived on the razor's edge of death until the very end. Doc Holliday. John Henry Holliday was a walking contradiction. To the world, he was a dentist from Georgia with refined manners and a silver tongue. To the frontier, he was a ghost with a shotgun, a man who smelled of whiskey and impending funerals. The curse of the White Plague. Doc was born into a respectable family, but fate handed him a death sentence early: tuberculosis. In the 19th century, this was a slow, agonizing crawl toward the grave. His mother had died of it, and when he felt the first blood in his own cough, he knew his time was a flickering candle. He moved west for the dry air, but he didn't find a cure. He found a lifestyle that matched his internal decay. If he was going to die, he wasn't going to do it quietly in a sanitarium. He took to the gambling dens of Texas, Kansas, and Arizona. Every hand of poker was a gamble against a reaper he already knew by name. A fear born of fatalism. Why was Doc Holliday so dangerous? Because you cannot threaten a man who is already dead. In the high-stakes world of the 1880s, men fought over land, women, or money. Doc fought because he was bored and in pain. His courage wasn't bravery in the traditional sense. It was pure, unadulterated fatalism. He was known to be incredibly fast with a revolver, but his greatest weapon was his psychological edge. When he looked at an opponent, he wasn't looking at a man he might have to kill. He was looking at a man who was simply in the way of his next drink. Tombstone and the Earp Alliance. His friendship with Wyatt Earp remains one of the most debated bonds in history. Why would a straight-laced lawman link himself to a cynical, dying gambler? Perhaps Earp saw in Doc the only man he could truly trust, because Doc had no ambition. He didn't want Earp's job, his money, or his glory. He only wanted loyalty. At the OK Corral, while others were shaking with adrenaline, Doc walked into the vacant lot with a short-barreled shotgun hidden under his coat, whistling. He was the only one who seemed comfortable in the chaos. He survived the lead rain of Tombstone, the Vendetta ride, and countless brawls in Denver and Leadville. The ultimate irony. The tragedy of Doc Holliday is that he never got the warrior's death he expected. After years of dodging bullets and defying lynch mobs, he ended up in a hotel bed in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. As he lay dying at 36, he looked at his feet. He wasn't wearing his boots. He reportedly whispered, "This is funny," and closed his eyes. The man who lived for the gunfight died in the silence of a sick room. Clay Allison. If Doc Holliday was a cold scalpel, Clay Allison was a jagged axe. He wasn't an outlaw by trade, but he was a man so consumed by inner demons that the law simply couldn't contain him. A mind shattered by war. Allison was a Confederate veteran, and many historians believe he suffered from what we now call PTSD, compounded by a physical injury to his head during his youth. This created a man who could be a charming neighbor one moment and a bloodthirsty maniac the next. He didn't kill for profit. He killed because of a twisted sense of honor, or more often, because of a sheer, uncontrollable surge of adrenaline. He was the wolf of the Washita, a man who treated violence as a form of celebration. The legend of the madman. The stories surrounding Allison are the stuff of nightmares. Once, in a dispute with another gunman named Chunk Colbert, the two men sat down for dinner together. They ate, drank, and laughed. As Colbert reached for his gun under the table, Allison, who had been watching Colbert's reflection in a coffee pot, drew faster and shot him in the head. He then finished his meal as if nothing had happened. He was known to ride through the streets of Canadian Texas or Cimarron, New Mexico, completely naked, screaming and firing his guns into the air just to see if anyone was brave enough to stop him. No one was. Even the bravest sheriffs knew that Allison didn't value his own life, which made him an impossible opponent. The darkness inside. Allison represented the psychotic element of the frontier. He wasn't a social bandit like Jesse James. He was a man who spoke to the corpses of his victims, who danced on the bars of saloons, and who once decapitated a man he suspected of murder and carried the head into a local tavern to show off. Despite his horrific reputation, he was often seen as a protector by some locals because he targeted those he deemed troublemakers. But the truth was simpler. Clay Allison just loved the fight. An unfitting end. A man like Allison should have died in a hail of bullets or at the end of a rope. Instead, his death was a cruel joke from the universe. In 1887, while driving a supply wagon, he fell from the seat. A wheel rolled over his neck, snapping it instantly. The most feared brawler in the West was taken out by a bump in the road. Tom Horn. Tom Horn was the apex predator of the Old West. While Doc was a gambler and Clay was a madman, Tom Horn was a professional. He was a man of the wilderness who turned the skills of a scout into the trade of an assassin. The Master Tracker. Before he was a killer, Horn was a hero. He was a key figure in the pursuit of Geronimo, working as a scout for the U.S. Army. He spoke Spanish and several Apache dialects. He could survive in the desert with nothing but a knife and his wits. He was a man of the earth, respected by the military and feared by his enemies. But the world changed. The Wild West began to be fenced in by powerful cattle barons. These barons didn't want law and order. They wanted their property protected. They hired Horn as a range detective, but everyone knew what that really meant. He was a state-sponsored hitman. The Ghost of the High Plains. Horn's method was terrifyingly modern. He didn't engage in quick-draw duels. He would find a high point overlooking a trail, lie still for 16 hours, and wait. When his target appeared, usually a small-time rustler or someone encroaching on the baron's land, Horn would squeeze the trigger of his .30-30 Winchester from 300 yards away. The victim would fall, and Horn would vanish. He would often leave a stone under the victim's head as a signature. He was a ghost that haunted the Wyoming range, a man who had replaced his soul with a calculation of windage and elevation. The Willie Nickel Incident. The end of the road for Horn came with the death of a child. Willie Nickel, a 14-year-old boy, was shot from ambush. The outrage was total. The civilized West could look away from the murder of rustlers, but it could not ignore the blood of a child. Horn was arrested after a questionable confession given while he was drunk. Whether he actually killed the boy or was a convenient scapegoat for the cattle barons who wanted to clean their hands is still debated by historians today. The Last Walk. On the day he was hanged in 1903, Tom Horn was the calmest man in the room. He watched the officials prepare the gallows, a water-powered mechanism, with a cold, analytical gaze. He had lived by the silence of the rifle, and he died with the same chilling silence. His death marked the true end of the Old West. The era of the scout was over. The era of the lawyer had begun. These three men, Holliday, Allison, and Horn, are the pillars of the real frontier. The Old West wasn't a movie. It was a place where morality was as thin as the mountain air, and where the line between a hero and a monster was often just a matter of who pulled the trigger first. They didn't leave behind a better world. They left behind a trail of spent casings and stories that still haunt the desert wind. They were the shadows of the frontier, and in their stories, we see the uncomfortable truth of what it took to settle a land that didn't want to be tamed.